Hello and welcome to and or back to the Jet Reel podcast. I am your host, Jill Therese, and today I am going to answer some of your questions in this wonderful bonus episode. It's not Tuesday when you're hearing this. Congrats. I might continue doing this, but we'll see. I don't know. Let's roll the intro music. Are we good with that? Are you sure? Are you ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, loyal listeners, if you do not follow the Jet Reel podcast Instagram, you may not be aware that this is not Tuesday. It's not a regular episode. If you gauge what day of the week it is by when I throw out a podcast, you should probably reevaluate your system because this might be changing. I would love nothing more than to be able to do more than one episode a week. I'm really going to try because A, mama needs the money. B, I cannot possibly answer all of your questions unless I do because, oh my God, I have started getting an influx and I asked for it. And I'm happy about it, but it's a lot. But hey, that gives me enough content and that gives you a lot of episodes. So I'm hoping that it'll work out best for everyone involved. And my podcast is something that I'm really passionate about. I love answering you guys' questions and I love talking. So though I may have to take some water breaks on this one because I believe we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, just 9. I think 9 questions to answer. And some of them are quite lengthy, but I have since improved my system a little bit and have pre-read all of the questions and have edited out some unnecessary details. Not that I don't love knowing every last detail about your lives. I read them, but for sake of time on the podcast, it's not entirely necessary. I kind of just want to get to like relevant background and the question. So while I appreciate all the information, I don't really care to read it aloud. I only have so much saliva in my mouth, and I would like to preserve it for giving you a reply. So yeah, I hope to be able to do this a little bit more often. I would love to be able to upgrade to 2 episodes a week, but I do have a master's program, a job working here with all the horses, my YouTube, the regular podcast episodes, and I actually just took on another job as a social media manager for a massage therapy place. So I'm doing a lot, but I don't have to pay for massages anymore or massages on my horse, so that's pretty lit. But yeah, well, that's hopeful. It's not set in stone yet, but that would be nice. So we're working towards all that. But yeah, before I begin this episode, opening a can of worms here. Don't know where this worm can is, but that is what the people say. If you would like to send me a question for me to answer on the podcast, please send it to jetrealpodcast@gmail.com, JETREAL podcast@gmail.com. Please, in the opening of your email, it would be fantastic if you could say either use my name or keep it anonymous and also ask this question in the podcast or answer it privately on an email. And either of those 2 things, happy to do. Just let me know, because if you send me an email to the podcast email, I'm going to assume you'd like me to read it, but if you don't say whether you want your name said or not, I'm just going to say anonymous. But yeah, so with all, sorry, bumping the mic. I always do that at least once per episode. You'd think I'd be more aware of my surroundings. But anyway, without further ado, let's jump into the first question here. So, anonymous listener asks here, I have been playing polo for a while now. I don't own my own horse, but there's a horse at my barn I ride most of the time. We have to switch barns for the season, so September to May, I'm at the barn with this horse. He's amazing to play, but he is very anxious when he's being led or walked up to the mounting block. Once I'm on him, he's smooth sailing. Sorry, I'm trying to read too fast. Smooth sailing. He paces around when we go up to the mounting block and doesn't stand still. He also has trouble leaving his stall sometimes. I'll try to lead him out and he just stops. I don't know if this is just because he knows he's going to have to work or if there might be something else I'm not seeing. I'm very interested in positive reinforcement, but Jack's owner and my coach aren't really a fan of it. Since he isn't my horse and other people ride him, are there any sorts of small activities or exercises that I could try to see if they might settle him down? I don't want to confuse him because other people ride him as well, but I also want to make sure that he is comfortable and excited about playing. I don't know if you can help with this or if you really might know that much about polo, but I value your opinion and suggestions would be helpful. Well, I am not a polo player and I don't know too much about it, but I have watched several polo matches and I feel like I get the gist. Obviously, you can't know all the intricacies if you are not one, but I feel like I know what the sport's about. So generally, when there is a horse who is balking to leave his stall or walk up to the arena or refusing to stand for the mounting block and gets very anxious, those are all signs of a horse who knows what's coming. At least to me, that's what it sounds like, that this is a horse that knows what's about to happen, and he's like, I don't want it. And that could be for any number of reasons. Sometimes horses are like, my breakfast is back there. I would like to stay and eat my breakfast. Sometimes they're like, it's cold in there, it's dark in there, it's scary, there's a lot of people running around. Maybe the arena itself is anxiety inducing. Another possibility is that it's painful. Something about the riding experience is causing him pain, because I don't think it's like, rarely ever have I worked with a horse when I've led them to the arena and they've stopped or refused to be mounted, that there wasn't an issue going on. I truly don't believe in the quote unquote stubborn or dominant horse that is like, no, I am disrespecting you and not wanting you to usurp my dominance, so you cannot get on me. That is not an idea that I prescribe to. And while laziness is a factor, typically if our horses like the job, they feel like they're getting good things out of it, they'll do it. Conversely, if they are scared enough of what will happen, they will also do it. So, I mean, there's two sides to every coin. Horses don't always just do things because they love it and they want to, but a horse that is communicating in this way, where he is not wanting to exit his stall and moving away from the mounting block, is a good sign, because this is a horse that feels comfortable enough with people to communicate in kind, polite ways. He's politely saying, I don't want to go in there, or I'd rather you not get on right now. Those are super polite ways, because he could just as easily, when you lead him out of the stall, he could rear up or he could bite you. And if you lead him out of the stall and you get there and you get on the mounting block, he could buck you off. I mean, there are endless worse ways, and sometimes if horses like this are ignored, they do escalate into those worse ways. And I think episode 21, I covered a very similar question to this on Tuesday's episode. But it's a clear sign to me when a horse is like, I'm not going in there, I'd rather you not get on, and I'm really uncomfortable and anxious in this situation. Those are signs that the horse is uncomfortable. If he wasn't acting anxious, then I would be like, I'd be more keen to be like, maybe he is just like, a little lethargic. Maybe we need to take a look at his diet and see if we can give him a little boost. But since he's exhibiting anxiety, it's probably more fear-based or pain-based than laziness. But that could be for any number of reasons. Like I said, the arena could be scary, but that doesn't seem to be like, he doesn't seem to be spooking a lot, because you say he's smooth sailing once you get on. So this happens with a lot of horses. They realize, and Zoe was very much like this too, and even Bo, that when everything leading up to riding, they were like, no, I don't want to do this, biting and kicking at me while I'm brushing and saddling and girthing. But as soon as I walk them to the arena, they might dance at the mounting block, but I got on and they were totally fine. We might have had a few arguments while we were riding, but I didn't care. I was like, I can bully you around and make you do what I want. And so it's a little bit more difficult to notice when you're on, because when the horse does act up and try to communicate those things, it's a lot easier to kind of quell those behaviors from the saddle, because you can just pull on them, or if they throw their head up, you can just make them round up, and it's a little bit easier to hide that from the saddle than on the ground, and it may be a little bit more difficult to notice. And I mean, he could just not be doing it while you're in the saddle altogether. But I like to listen to horses like this when they are exhibiting those signs, because they're trying to tell you something. And one of two things happens if that gets ignored. The horse either gets louder and starts screaming at you and becomes dangerous, or the horse just shuts down and accepts that this is his life and it's going to suck forever. And those are not really either path that we want for our horse. So for me, what I would do, I know this isn't your horse, but I would have a serious conversation with its owner or trainer and just be like, I really need you to back me on this, because I feel like something is going on with this horse. I've never known him to, balk at his job, but something's up. We need to reevaluate his tack and equipment, make sure that everything fits, make sure that he doesn't have some sort of back problem, because horses that don't want to be mounted, there's usually some sort of pain or anxiety problem. So if he's worried about being ridden, usually that's either because riding itself hurts. Maybe the rider has strong hands and is being a little rough, like that's a possibility, or maybe that riding is painful in the other sense that like just the sheer weight of the rider is hurting the horse's back because maybe he has kissing spine. I know you guys are probably like, oh my God, stop talking about kissing spine, but it is super prevalent, and that is absolutely a reason why horses may not want to be ridden. Or he could have a shoulder that's out of alignment. We had a horse here for a while that could not pick up her left lead, like could not do it. And no matter how hard I tried to get her to pick it up, I tried everything I knew to get that mare to pick up her left lead. And finally, I was like, okay, I'm not going to step into the realm of abusing you, because I tried lateral stuff and changing directions, using poles, and I just could not get her to switch her lead. And so finally we had a chiropractor out, and she looked at her, and her entire scapula was dropped like 4 inches lower than the other one. And we were like, okay, no wonder she couldn't. And then she got adjusted, and then after a few more adjustments, she was good to go. So it makes a huge difference when you don't just like force the horse to do these things, because they're trying to communicate something to me or to you. To me, this mare was like, dude, I can't do it. And I was like, but what if? And she was like, but I can't. Because at first I was like, maybe she's not understanding what I'm asking. And then it became clear after a few more asks in different ways, she was like, no, dude, I can't do it. And I was like, oh, okay, lit. Let's figure it out. And oh my God, I keep bumping this stupid mic. I'm getting hot. I get hot when I talk. But anyway, so I would really advise having a look at the horse, because if you're not noticing anything bad when they're brushing, they may not have ulcers, but because that's usually the indication. Like if you go to touch a horse or brush it and it starts biting at you, it's probably a strong indication that they have ulcers because their skin hurts. But if none of that is happening and it's just like leading him away from his stall, and at the mounting block you're noticing all that anxiety and the like, I don't want to go in there, something is up and it's worth looking at. And mad props to you for listening to your horse and being like, I don't know if this is like, if I should just push through it or not. Asking is a huge step outside of what most people do. They're just like, nope, the horse is being rude. It needs to be corrected. So I'd have the horse looked at if you can. Like I said, really try to be an advocate for them. I know it can be super hard, especially when it's not your horse, but to be like, look, trainer, owner, whomever, I really have a feeling that this horse needs to be looked at and something's going on, because I've never known him to not want to do his job. So we need to try and rule everything out, because I don't want to be riding him through pain if he is experiencing some discomfort. So I'd like to, whatever you think may be best, you might have to do a little research, really pay attention to him. Like if you're brushing him, you touch his back and he's sensitive anywhere, like things like that. Or if you notice he's really stiff behind, it could be hocks, or like with Mace, having trouble picking up a lead, her shoulder. And so there are just a bunch of different things that you can do to try and think and consider and be like, okay, well, what is the issue here? Try and I guess it's, oh God, I can never remember if it's deductive or inductive reasoning. One of them. Figure out, take general to specific, figure out what the issue is, and see if you can't help him, because it really does suck when you just have to beat horses through that, because you have to pull on them to get them to go to the mounting block because they don't want to go, and then when you're trying to get on them, you have to be really rough with them to get them to stand still at the mounting block or jump on at the go. And that's just no fun for anybody. This is supposed to be a sport where we're, enjoying our horses and appreciating them, and the horses aren't having to suffer as a result. So, and it may be an equipment change, maybe his teeth hurt, or maybe, the bit's too harsh, or the saddle doesn't fit, or the girth is pinching him somewhere. Like there are endless possibilities, but I would really advise looking into that rather than just riding him off as a lazy horse. It's not quite the answer you asked for. As far as like little things that you could do to help him settle down, that only really works outside of those circumstances until pain is ruled out. Like if he had like a fear of the arena and was afraid of it, then you could work in the arena, you know, making it a good place, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't sound like he's scared of the arena. It's more like because like you said, once he's in there, he's fine. It's just he's balking. He's like, I don't want to go in there. And that usually isn't like a fear response. It's usually I am predicting that what's about to happen is not going to feel great. So yeah, I think it's really just a matter of, it's really common. We don't take horses' athleticism seriously enough. Like prime athletes have all sorts of massage therapists, muscle therapists, chiropractors, physical therapists, like all of these things to help keep them in tip-top shape, and it really gets undervalued in the horse world except for at the top levels. But you wonder why those top-level athletes compete as long as they do. It's because they're maintained. And if they're not, then that's when they start to fall apart. And especially at the lower levels, when horses are more disposable, they don't get that prime treatment. And then you see a lot of the behavioral issues where they're pinning their ears and biting you or not wanting to go to the mounting block. And that is no hate on any one discipline. It is just the way it is. I mean, if the horse is not, saying he wants to go do the job, you need to make it a job that he enjoys, whether that means helping his body out, helping him out equipment-wise, or maybe a change of career. That's also something to consider. This horse may not enjoy playing polo. I've ridden several horses that don't enjoy jumping. They don't enjoy trail rides. There are different things. And yes, you can make it a really good experience and you can work through training, but inherently some horses do prefer some careers over others. But you can absolutely do positive reinforcement with him. And horses can tell people apart. And they know your scent, and they know your face, and they can recognize you, and you can become a stimulus for positive reinforcement and good things. Because, like, when I walk past Zoe, she whinnies at me, and she nickers at me, and she's like, hey, dude, let's do some things. But if Sunny were to walk past her, or Jeremy, or any of the other people that work here, she's not going to nicker at them because they don't train her. But I do. So, horses can absolutely tell you apart, and you can totally work with them, and it doesn't matter. But yeah, as far as like making a positive reinforcement change to ridden work, I don't really, based on what you've said, and I am not a vet, and I'm not your trainer, and I haven't seen it, so I can't give a definitive answer, but I would say that for the most part, this doesn't sound like a training error to me. I mean, unless the training is just really rough on the horse and it's just not a fun thing for him to do, then that could, like I said, be a call for a training change. But yeah, it sounds more like potentially pain issue. And I mean, like I said, that could be due to how he's being ridden, but I don't know. So I hope that helps, at least get some wheels turning. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. On to the next question here. From an anonymous listener, I work with a trainer who teaches traditionally, in the sense that I still ride, jump, trail ride, event, use a bridle with a bit, etc., but who also teaches in a gentle way that does not and will never include whips, spurs, kicking, or any forms of punishment. We work on pressure and release. Yes, it is all done with my horse's realm of understanding, and without any means of force or discomfort. I know my horse is very content and happy, and I've worked hard over many years to keep it that way. My question is, how or why would you argue that using gentle pressure and release while only going at the horse's pace is not as effective as using solely positive reinforcement? Some background, as my horse is a 10-year-old off the track, got him at 6, and he has only ever been ridden by a jockey and myself. Sounds like me and Zazu. He was very nervous and anxious and stressed when I got him, but I've worked through all of it by being simply patient and kind and letting him realize he's not in danger or completely on his own. Now I use positive reinforcement as often as I can, but like you, I can see how riders would feel stuck and they can't ride their horses. I found that going at my horse's pace without using any force but applying kind, considerate pressure helped him not only learn quickly, but made him confident doing the work. I would love to hear your thoughts on this and maybe even talk about ways that other riders should incorporate positive reinforcement, but also use pressure and release as a part of their training too when it's appropriate. Okay, so there is a lot to unpack here, but since I spent 20 minutes on the previous question, I'm going to try and keep it concise. Okay, so some things in here. While I agree that pressure and release can be used in a kind, compassionate way, saying that there is no discomfort at all is misunderstanding what pressure and release is, for the most part, because like when you're riding your horse, like pulling on the bit is not going to be comfortable in any circumstance. That doesn't mean it's bad or it's, evil, but it is uncomfortable. So while you can use negative reinforcement politely, I would caution you to not get too carried away on being like, I'm not using any force or any pressure, blah, blah, blah. Like, it definitely is still happening, but that doesn't make it a bad thing, because you'll lose arguments very quickly saying things like that. But you can absolutely use kind, considerate pressure. And I think that negative reinforcement can be used in a way that helps clarify things, and I think that's the way it should be used, not in an increasing pressure sense. And while I say that, it is very idealistic. It's really difficult. Speaking as somebody who rides horses and has ridden for a long time, especially if you're somebody who is trained traditionally, it is very difficult not to use increasing pressure. And is something that I strive for. I would rather not use increasing pressure, but that said, consistent pressure that doesn't increase isn't necessarily the best thing either, because that's just as annoying, arguably, and frustrating and can create tension, that sort of thing. But I think if negative reinforcement is used well, I think that it is absolutely okay. I mean, it's the predominant way people ride, and I think the first step to creating a more ethical equestrian world is making negative reinforcement better. I don't know that switching to positive reinforcement is going to happen anytime soon, and I don't necessarily know that it should switch entirely, because I don't think that negative reinforcement should be entirely done away with. But that is treading on a very careful ground. I think the way that it's used most common is not how we should be using it, because I know, and it's not just my, backyard Arkansas trainer. I mean, I had a really good trainer, and I had several different trainers here, and I have also ridden under the best of the best riders, who were Olympians or pre St. George level dressage riders and FEI judges and shit. Like, I mean, I've ridden under a ton of people, and that's not to brag, but that's to say that it is very common for increasing pressure to be used, and a lot of force, a lot of correction, and just like being really hard on horses. And I don't think that is the way that we want this sport to go, because I think when we get really tied into competition, we kind of lose how important the horse-human relationship is. And we all get into this as children who are in love with the animal, and we're like, this is the most beautiful animal ever. I love them. I want to spend all my time learning about them and learning how to ride them and communicate with them. And somewhere along the way, that gets lost in, like, I want to win pretty ribbons and compete and be impressive. And that is like, I think it needs to come back. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to excel at competition, but I think that there needs to be a balance between that and still being considerate and compassionate to the horse, because sometimes, in most cases, well, I wouldn't say in most cases, but in a lot of cases that I have seen, it is often that the competition far outweighs the horse's well-being, and I am not excluding myself in that. So, yeah, to answer your question, now that I've gone off on that tangent, the question is, how or why would you argue that using gentle pressure and release while only going at the horse's pace is not as effective as using solely positive reinforcement? So, the first thing that I would say is it's very hard to use gentle negative reinforcement, pressure and release. If you can, and if you are very good at that, and you have a trainer, which it sounds like you do, who is very compassionate and kind, that's more power to you. Most of us have not been trained that way, and our muscle memory and our knee-jerk reactions are to get stronger. And I am not an angel. When I ride some of the client horses, I am riding and I find myself getting stronger, and I'm like, okay, no, you have to help the horse understand, not just get stronger and force them to do it. And so yeah, but like I've said in the past, when I was riding Zoe before her kissing spine diagnosis, is that I really do think that negative reinforcement can be used in a way that is soft and kind and guiding, not so much as like I'm exerting something that you don't like in order to remove it, and then reinforce your behavior that way. The way that I use negative reinforcement, and it's arguable, it's like we're getting into, like training theology here, but God, it's so hard to explain. There's so many different facets, but the biggest thing to consider is what is most reinforcing to the horse. If you use both negative reinforcement and positive, what the reinforcer to the horse is what matters, because you can go around the arena and tell your horse to turn left by pulling on your left rein really hard until the horse finally submits and goes left, and then you release, and then you can click and treat. But the thing that made the horse turn was the pressure, and the release of that pressure is what mostly reinforced the behavior, not the treat that he got afterward. I'm sure the treat plays some role, but wildly overshadowed by the harsh pressure from the rein. So in my training, what I like to do is make the negative reinforcement, if I can. Obviously, it's always up to the horse, and I'm not always successful. But I want to make the positive reinforcement more salient than the negative. So, just I'm so caught up because negative reinforcement is a little bit tricky, because in order to do it, you first have to apply an aversive. So like in the example of telling the horse to turn, by pulling really hard on the behavior, it's arguable, or on the rein, it's arguable that you are punishing the going straight behavior when the initial cue is given to turn and the horse doesn't turn and you keep pulling. It's arguable that you're punishing the going straight, and then when the horse turns, you're alleviating it, because by definition, positive punishment is applying something the animal doesn't like to decrease behavior, and by definition, negative reinforcement is removing something that the horse doesn't like to increase behavior. So I hope that is clear enough, but it gets really tricky when you start playing the quadrants game of what is technically what, because logistically, in order to use negative reinforcement, you have to first use positive punishment. And if the horse isn't totally disturbed by it, and obviously there's the sliding scale of what is punishment, slight pressure on a rein is not the same as whipping your horse. So, and arguably, if it's not decreasing a behavior, then it's not punishment. But that's something to consider, that negative reinforcement, you have to first, potentially apply positive punishment. But in positive reinforcement, it's arguable that the whole time that you're not reinforcing the behavior, you're using negative punishment. But again, that's where you get dangerous playing the quadrants game of what is this and what is that? But it's all around that we all live in. We're all constantly experiencing those 4 different things, and obviously some negative punishers and some positive punishers don't affect us as much as others, and it is the same to horses. So on that logic, that's where I'm I think it's safer to use positive reinforcement, because you're less likely to do harm. But like I said, I think if you're educated and you're with a good trainer and you're doing it well and ethically and humanely, then I think it's okay. But I also mostly prescribe to the Lima principle, the least intrusive, minimally aversive, where you start at the bottom of the humane hierarchy, or I don't know, I've heard some arguments that it's actually a circle and loopy and blah, blah, blah. But, you start by making sure the horse isn't in any pain, that he's able to do what you're going to ask. Then you set up the scenario for success. You make sure the environment is good for training new things or what have you. And then you use positive reinforcement, and then you move up from there all the way up to positive punishment. But I like to reserve those for emergency scenarios where we're going to die unless it happens. But that is a rare day. But for training, usually I like to start with positive reinforcement. But unless Like, ridden behaviors to me are a little bit more difficult and a little confusing because in order to get the ridden behavior, it's hard to give your horse like a hand cue, and you can give a verbal cue, but I mean, if you're somebody who's trying to compete and you compete in dressage, you can't give a verbal cue, which sucks. Why did they do that? They're like, it's cool if you kick your horse, but you can't say a word. Like, what? How on earth does that make any sense? But fine, Yusuf. Anyway, so I don't know. I think it's a lot harder to abuse positive reinforcement than it is negative reinforcement. I just think it's really easy to get harsh in that paradigm. And like I said, I'm no angel to it. But that's my main argument. But using gentle pressure and release, if it's done well, I mean, I think it can be as effective as using strictly positive reinforcement and vice versa. But I mean, like, if it's just as effective, why not use the one that's positive reinforcement, So, I mean, I get it, but everybody comes from different strokes. If that's what you prefer, that's what you prefer. I'm going to take a break here and turn on a light because it's getting very dark in my house as the sun's setting, and I'm going to take a drink and get back. So it'll be a second for you guys. Okay, so during my break, I realized that I forgot to answer the second half of that question, how to use positive reinforcement, but when you use negative reinforcement as well, or pressure and release. You can do both, absolutely. I mean, that's pretty much my goal with Zoe, is to do both, but more emphasis on the positive reinforcement and use negative reinforcement more as guidance, like with a rein cue, but I would break it down more so than just like, I'm going to pull on this rein, and then when she gives me the full head turn behavior, then I'm going to click. I would be like, any indication that she's going to turn into that would get a click, and then we would gradually up the criteria from there, not such a jump. But it's fine either way, but that's just how I would do it. You can also just entirely keep your sessions separate and just ride traditionally and do positive reinforcement on the ground. That's also an option. And often for new beginner, that's a little redundant. For new positive reinforcement trainers, I highly recommend that because it gets very tricky trying to do it from the saddle. It's still not something that I consider myself good at. So I would definitely recommend keeping them separate until you really feel like you've got a good grasp on what you're doing. Okay. Next question. My horse it's from listener Kristen. My horse, Zeus, I have been working with positive reinforcement thanks to you. Oh, sweet. For about 5 months now. So far, he can target, smile, yield his fore and hindquarters, back up with visual and or verbal cues. Currently, I'm teaching him to roll a ball around with his nose and to stay/ground tie. Very, very cool. Zoe has yet to learn a ball thing, but I definitely have not tried to work on that, but that is super cool. It's a very fun thing to work on. Something I've always struggled with, however, is keeping his attention. All he wants to do when I pull him out of his grassy pasture is eat grass. I can ask a cue 2 to 5 times, and he won't pay attention to me. It makes our training sessions go super slow, and we don't get very much done. Sometimes I will grab his lead rope so that he doesn't have enough slack to get grass, and he'll do 1 to 3 tricks for me, and then I'll go right back to the grass. The only places on the property without grass are the 2 dirt arenas, but people are almost always riding or have a lesson in them, and I don't want to get in the way. There's also the gravel parking lot, but that's not a very comfy or safe place to train. Do you have any ideas on how I can keep his attention? It's not a huge deal, but I wish he was more engaged. I see your videos of Zoe participating so enthusiastically, and I get a bit jealous. There are reasons for that. I will explain in a moment. Things I've tried: using a variety of treats in each session: oats, carrots, horse treats. Training in his paddock. He's more interested there, but the other gellings will mob me. He does not care for scratches, and I don't use alfalfa pellets anymore because he has choked on them twice. I'm just about to stuff loads of grass in my fanny pack. Sorry, UK listeners, I know that's a swear word, but that is not a swear word here, so we'll say bum bag. Anyway, so lots to get to here. So very cool. You sound like you've been really successful with him, especially teaching hind quarter and forehand yielding is not easy. So mad props to you there. But I also feel you on how frustrating this is because Zoe looks super engaged and participating in the pasture that we work in because she has access to that grass all the time, and it's nothing new, and she's not super excited about it. And when I go in there, the alfalfa pellets are the novelty. And she's like, oh my God, that's what I want. So she's super game. And she also, has usually had hay and grain. And I usually work pretty close to feed time so that she's not like hyper excited about the alfalfa pellets, because sometimes she can get a little bit over the top, and it's annoying because then I have to make our training sessions about staying calm and relaxed. And I'm like, for now, the stuff that I'm having to work on with her rehab is just easier to do around feed time, because then she's less anxious and excitable about the food. But yeah, so that may be something that could work to your advantage if you wait until feed time, and then let him eat his dinner and work with him immediately after, so he's not like super, super motivated to get to grass. But I know that can be inconvenient to do. Another thing to do, it's a great idea to just use the grass. If it's a really high value reinforcer to him, which it looks like it is, like he might be able to work for that, because there's this thing called contra freeloading. And you can look it up. It's CONTRA, freeloading. And it occurs when the horse has access to everything. So pretty much all things are equal. So you have grass and the ground has grass, and the horse can either choose to eat for free off of the ground or to work for it and engage his mind. And animals and humans alike, we love enrichment. We love things that entertain us and bring enrichment to our lives. So often the animals will choose to work for it, which is a really fun thing for us and really cool to observe, because it's like, oh my God, it's all around you, but you're still wanting to work for it. But with that, when you start out, you might have to make it a really high rate of reinforcement, because often what happens when you're starting to lose horses, when they're not really paying attention or they're not really interested, it's usually one of two or three things. One, the reinforcer isn't something that the animal likes, or the reinforcer is not a high enough value. So your pellets may not be stronger. Or your treats might not be higher reinforcing than the grass is, especially like this time of year. The grass is really good and they're like, yes, this is what I want. So your treats may not be overpowering it, or they may not be something that the horse is super into. Two, you're not reinforcing enough. The horse is like having to do too much for not enough reward, and they're like, I'm not doing this if you're not going to reward. Like, I'd like to get paid for my work just as much as you do. And the third thing is that your horse is confused, or you're asking too much of them. Something that I have been subject to, and a lot of people that I see like sending videos, something that they tend to do is they hold, like, say for target training, they hold the target out and the horse moves towards it and they click and treat. And then the next time they up the criteria. It's only been one time, and they up the criteria to the horse must touch it. And say the horse maybe bumps it that time and they're good. And you're like, okay, the horse knows to touch it. The second time, the horse kind of like wanders around, sniffs your hand, sniffs your body, maybe sniffs the stick that the target's on. And then he just looks at you like, did I do it? And the horse is confused. That should be an indication like, okay, we need to back it down. But sometimes what'll happen is people just stand there and wait, and it's nuanced, because if you're a really good trainer and you know that your horse will start offering behaviors and will start trying to guess at what you're doing, then it's okay to wait. But if the horse isn't a savvy clicker horse, and maybe you're a novice trainer, it's not really good to wait. You should probably, or you'd be better off just backing down and being like, okay, I'm going to ask for less now. Just look at the target and then click for that. And then gradually work your way up to the nose is getting closer and closer and closer, and then the nose is touching it. Make sure the horse or the nose is touching it consistently now. Then you can start incorporating changes of direction, like moving the orientation of the target around, up, low, whatever. So those things. So the third thing, you're asking too much, or the horse just isn't like, he's like, I'm not getting enough for this, or I don't know what you're asking. I don't know how to get the reward, and this is easier and more fun, because what we're doing is not fun. So those are some things to really consider, and I know that it can be really hard to like look at your training and be like, am I doing those things? And I obviously don't know you. I've never seen you ride or work with your horse. I mean, So not an attack on you by any means. Those are just things that I like to cover first when you're having this problem. But like you said, it might be a really good idea to just grab grass. I know it can be annoying to like sit there and pick it, but if that's what he's going for, then you can do that. And, when you start working with him and you're trying to train whatever you're working on, keep your rate of reinforcement really high. So he's getting a lot of that grass, and then gradually as the session goes on, you can like see if you can back off a little bit and you don't have to do so much. And hopefully by then he'll be like, okay, this is fun. I understand what I'm doing. I'm successful and I'm good at it. And that is something so important, is you have to make sure that the horse is staying successful throughout the session. And if ever you get to a point where you're like, I don't know how to make you successful here, I'm a little confused or whatever, you can always just leave a pile on the ground and be like, here, this is yours. I'm going to go sit and then come up with the game plan. And that can be a little bit easier. So I hope that helps somewhat with that. I definitely know how frustrating it is when I take Zoe into the big field where we keep our jumps. She tends to want to graze for a while. And I mean, that might be something else you can do is if it's a pasture, you can turn him out or just graze him for a little while and maybe have a start of session cue. Like maybe you just graze him without your fanny pack on, and then maybe you go get it and come back, or, something that's a cue that like, okay, I'm going to start trying to train you now. But maybe let him have his fill of it first. If you can turn him out there for a while, let him have it. But it's always going to be a little bit more difficult to train in a new place. And sometimes you just have to see if you can let them get acclimated for a while. But I know it can be annoying because I am a person with ADHD and a very busy brain and likes to be doing something at all times. And hand grazing is the bane of my existence. I know that it's bonding. I know that it, like, horses graze together and that's the most bonding experience for them, but I hate it so much. I do not like standing there holding a lead rope, walking around, watching them eat grass. It is so boring. So usually I have to bring a book and like sit near them and just do that. And Zoe, like the other day, I followed her around in the field while she grazed, and then eventually she wandered into the arena and I followed her in there and I just let her walk around, and eventually she came up to me and she smiled, and that's her cue for like, I would like to start training now, please give me food. And so I was like, yes, oh wise trainer, I will give you food now for that. And so I don't know, that's something to consider as well. Okay, on to the next question. How many have we done so far? 3. Dear God, it's been 40 minutes. I'm so sorry. This is going to be an extra long one, so buckle up. Also, this email is going to be a super long one. I was talking about the episode. It's going to be long, but okay, this email is long. From an anonymous listener. I started riding at my current barn because it was very much competition oriented, and at the time all I wanted was to win, but sometimes it's too much for me. The words rip his teeth out and stick your spurs in her are heard too often in my opinion. All that said, my goal in the horse world was to make it to the top and have a farm of my own, the whole 9 yards of a horsey kid's dream. I'm going to stop reading for a moment and butt in here. That's exactly my training experience. While I had trainers that would try and balance it out with the kind, I can't tell you how many times I got told to rip his face off, rip his teeth out, hit him harder. Even recently, like some of the rides that I had prior to a show were just like, I'm trying to be vague, were just like, you need to really beat him, dig into him, tell him who's boss. And I was just like, nope, I'm not going to do that. But it is really hard to deal with, especially when you're like, I don't want to beat my horse. I'm trying to get this thing to like me. Okay. But I empathize with the dream of wanting to compete and be good at it and make it, okay. Continue on your email here. I lease a mare from a friend's family and we compete in the jumper. She seems to enjoy it, but I'm not very good at gauging whether she likes it or she's just conditioned into going with it. For example, sometimes it's hard to tell whether her relaxing into the bridle, saying, yes, I'm comfortable here, or saying, I feel helpless. This is the only thing I feel as though I can do. My first question is, are there any general signs of genuine relaxation that I can look for and then reinforce? I've tried to reinforce her as much as I can for licking and chewing and dropping her head when I'm holding her. Okay, so that last bit is a little bit confusing because reinforce, releasing, I'm assuming, and then dropping her head when you're holding her, I'm assuming like when you're maintaining connection. So yeah, I mean, that's just using negative reinforcement correctly. When the horse is showing signs of relaxation, like you said, licking and chewing means the horse is coming down from their sympathetic nervous system, where they're like on high alert, and maybe something stress them out, even if it's very temporary. Like if you notice like a horse when they're grazing, if they pick their head up really fast and they look out into the distance, and then just about like the time that right before they go back to grazing, they'll lick and chew, it's because they're coming down from that moment of a little bit stress. Obviously, horses can lick and chew when they've got like something in their teeth or they're chewing, but I'm talking about context outside of that, when because when horses get anxious, they stop eating. And it's just like humans, when you're really scared or something's like got you on edge, your like secondary body processes shut off, like your digestive system. So like for me, when I would used to compete and I would go run cross country, my mouth would get like dirt dry, like so dry right when I was in the start box, because I was kicking into my parasympathetic or my sympathetic nervous system, and I was stressed, and my body was like, okay, we don't need to digest things right now. We need to focus on the threat here. And so my body stopped producing saliva, and I was like, oh my God, my mouth is so dry. So that's the same thing with horses. And so, maybe they had a bite of grass if they were grazing, and they resume eating when the threat is gone. Or their body starts producing saliva again, and then they lick and chew to kind of clear that. But so those are signs that the horse is relaxing. It is a good thing, but it does not mean the horse is physically digesting information. I hate when people say that is not, where's the science? But yeah, so that's a sign of relaxation for sure. It's a book that I really recommend reading for stuff like this is Language, Signs, and Calming Signals of Horses by Raquel Dreisma. You can type it in on Amazon. It's, I think it's like $20 or $30. Such a good book. Like I said in a previous episode, it's a little dry because it's very scientific, but it literally walks you through every single type of, behavior that's all scientific, studied, and it has been done following the scientific method. Like studying a big group of horses, paying attention to their behaviors and noticing trends, and what could be the potential causes. So things like that, really recommend reading that, especially if you're wanting to educate yourself on signs of relaxation. That book has a list. But yeah, it's difficult, but a horse that's really relaxed under saddle will have a big swinging gait, a soft back top line, and will be really soft in the bridle. You can turn them pretty easily. They're really supple either direction, but this is also going to be a horse that has, little to no health issues, and throw a rock and a horse has a health issue. They're fragile beings, so, like, just like us. I mean, we get locked up in either direction, and you're like, okay, I need to, get a massage or get a chiropractor to look at my neck, why it's so tight. So, those things help with that as well. But it can be difficult to tell, but generally a horse that is, I feel helpless and this is the only thing I feel like as though I can do, those horses are generally like pretty lazy behind the leg and just like disconnected from the world. That would be the learned helplessness phase. But horses that are trained in negative reinforcement generally know how they're supposed to carry themselves. At least if they're trained in a more correct way, they know the places where the rider is going to release or have a softer hand, where they need to have their head set. And if they come up, then the pressure is going to increase. There's going to be more leg. There's going to be more rein pressure. And then when the horse drops its head, that all relaxes. So yeah, but any level of like exercising, working out, using yourself is not going to be entirely comfortable. So that goes for both humans and horses. Anyway, trying to burn through these questions quickly and it's just not helping or happening. Okay. Continuing this email, back to the competition issue I mentioned before. I enjoy competing in the jumpers, but would love to continue with her, but there is a recurring problem both on and off property. When she's tied, being tacked up, not doing anything at her saddle, or is alone, she seems incredibly stressed and uncomfortable. She communicates this by moving around nonstop and not always dangerously, but never being able to stand still. I can't leave her alone in the aisle, cross-tied, long enough to put my saddle away, which is a 30-second trip. She dances, paws, and tries to turn around on the ties. She's broken some ties, left marks on the ground from her shoes, and successfully wrapped herself up and then spooked in the ties because she turned all the way around. Dear God, that is scary. I've tried putting her in the wash stall, which has 3 walls and 1 opening, but she has nothing to turn around to, but to no avail. I've also tried talking to her the whole time I'm working with her on the ground, making the tacking and untacking process as fast and efficient as possible, and making a shh sound and giving her a treat and scratching her sweet spot when she stands. Treating and scratching seems to work sometimes, but it's often she stands for 5 seconds or so and then continues to dance. I know that these behaviors take time, but it's not something I'm sure I have because I lease her, not own her. In the ties, it can become dangerous. She might swing her hind end around and catch me between her and the wall when I don't have enough time to jump out of the way, or pound my foot when she's pawing. I don't want to hit her or reprimand her strongly because that only seems to escalate the situation, not calm her down, as it normally would. I mean, if you get hit when you're stressed, now you're only going to get more stressed. In response to her moving around or pawing, her owners have regularly smacked her on the stomach. Jesus Christ. I hate that so much. A bit further back and down where it's sensitive, and yelled her name. They advised me to do the same because it, quote unquote, distracts her. That's such stupid logic. Oh my God. Okay. Keep it together, Jill. That's, I feel your irritation there. It's, God. Okay. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I don't agree with them beating her because she's stressed, as you should. It should be mentioned, I think, that her owners are not bad people. My trainer does this sometimes with her horses, and I've tried to keep her away from my lease. And I'm still with this trainer because I believe her knowledge of riding is extensive and helpful to me, but her ground manners, so to speak, are not where I would agree with them. I think her owners learned from our trainer that that's the only way to stop the horse from performing an undesirable behavior. Okay. This brings me to my main question. Are there any ways I can help her to de-stress using positive reinforcement, ways that won't affect her in a major way when our lease ends and I stop working with her? For example, when I'm no longer her primary handler, I don't want her to offer a behavior or calmness she would have previously gotten rewarded for, but instead receive nothing. I've heard that mixing positive and negative reinforcement isn't good for the horse as it can get confusing for them, so I'm at a bit of a loss. I want to make this incredible mare more comfortable because she's truly a wonder horse. I love her to death and I wish more than anything that we could buy her, but other circumstances are keeping us from doing so. We are not in a position to move barns, and we are in an area that this kind of treatment at our budget for riding is more common than I'd like. So this is a highly common circumstance. Incredibly common, especially in my area and other areas that I've been to. All my friends are from around the world, and this is not uncommon in barns. So it sounds like you're really doing the best you can, and you're trying to really hear your horse and be there for her and listen, and that's not an easy thing to do, first of all. When you have a horse that is stressed and acting up and you have everyone around you telling you that you need to be violent with them and hit them, which is violent, by the way, like smacking a horse in the way that you are describing especially is violent. Obviously, giving a poke on the nose, not violent, but not great either. I don't recommend doing that. But smacking them on the belly and screaming at them is violent and should never be used in a training scenario. Obviously, if you're about to get pinned up against the wall, you have to do what you have to do. But in order to help the horse, there has to be a difference. Like I said earlier, I think that punishment should only be reserved for, you're about to die circumstances. Because I just don't think it has a place in training. It doesn't help the learner learn anything new. All they know is wrong, wrong, wrong. They don't learn, hey, this is what I need you to do. You're just telling them they're wrong the entire time. And that is what's frustrating about stuff like that, is it's like people just assume that you can just beat an animal into submission, but is that really the animal you want? Is that really the relationship you want? And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but it's frustrating that people still think like this. And I get where it comes from because, like you said, these aren't inherently bad people. It's what they've been taught and what they've been brainwashed, frankly, and indoctrinated to think. I was one of them. I thought the exact same thing. I thought that I had to dominate my horse in order to have a good relationship with her. But instead, I have a quite calm, respectful horse that is now more apt to want to be with me because I treat her differently. And I don't force my, agenda on her. And we work together. And that is what we need to do with this mare here. So what I would recommend is if you are able And I hope that you can find some time to do this. If you can get to your lesson an hour earlier, or if you can, come out other times when you're not going to ride and you're not on a time crunch, work with her. Because what you may be doing inadvertently in trying to be speedy and trying to, hustle around her so she's not going to panic in the cross ties is your energy is so high because you're, anxious and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to stress her out and I want to get done and get her out of the cross ties. What you may be doing is hyping the energy up around her, and that's stressing her out even more. So what I think needs to be done is when you're not on a time crunch, you're not worried about, having to get on and having to ride and, not upset your trainer or anything, is work with her and, take her to the cross ties, or take her to the aisle and anywhere where you can get, a still response. So you might even have to start out in her stall or in her pasture, and you can work on a verbal cue or a hand cue or something like that. Or I would probably use a verbal cue, just like stand or something like that. And when she's just standing, reward her. Or you could also use a mat, like a floor mat, and train her to stand on the mat and put both front feet on it and just stand, and then reward. It's such a good place to be. We want both of your feet on the mat. Oh my God, it's so good. You're so calm. You're so chill. And she can just stand there, and it's such a good place to be. And then if you put it anywhere, you will have to back up a few steps. But if she knows, if she's out in her pasture, you can throw the mat around and have her go to it. And then when she's standing there, she's such a good girl. She's getting all the treats. So good. And then, if you take her into the aisleway in the barn where maybe she gets a little bit stressed, you put that mat down and she's like, oh my God, I know what to do. And then you can give her a bunch of treats. And she may still be a little bit anxious, because that's, previously been a spot that made her anxious, but you can make it a really good place to be, and just give her lots of treats. I wouldn't tie her to begin with, obviously, because she'll pull back, but just stand there and reward her and make it like a super good place to be. It's calm. We're not in a hurry. Everything's okay. And if she gets overwhelmed, you can take her out and back up a few steps. And it may take a while. And I know that it's, you're like, you don't have a whole lot of time to do this because she's not your horse, but it is something that's worthwhile and can change this horse's entire life and also be safer for you and future riders. So I would really recommend that. And eventually you can work your way up to the wash stall, because actually I understand what you're trying to do with having the walls, but horses are inherently claustrophobic animals, and that may be working against you, where she's like, oh my God, I can't see anything. I can't get away. So it may be better to leave that for last and just make the aisle something really good. And maybe you can even walk her through the aisle, just up and down and giving her treats. And you can periodically stop and give her treats, really reward her for standing still, but just make it a really good place to be. And if she's too uncomfortable to stand still, then, like I said, you can probably just walk her and make it really good, calm, relaxing. Try to pick a day when there's not a bunch of people coming in and out. And you can work up to that. I know it sounds tedious and frustrating, but like I said, it could really change this horse's life. And if you can fix this behavior, then people can stop beating her. And then you can be like, look what happens. Sometimes in situations like this, I'm not advocating for doing anything behind owners' backs, but sometimes it might be to the benefit of the horse if you just kind of do it well. And then you're like, look what I did. Look how good your horse is. Again, not advocating for working behind people's backs, but I think in some circumstances it might be a little bit justified if it's for the betterment of the horse, especially if they might be a little resistant because they're like, no, smacking works. And you're like, but the horse isn't calming down though. So trying to make it a really good place for her to be, all she has to do is stand still. That's it. And that can be a really hard thing for some horses to do. So another thing you could do if you don't want to do the mat training or a vocal cue you're not really comfortable with, you can use a stationary tie. A lot of people use a boat buoy. I used a water bottle. And I tied a piece of hay string around the cap and then tied it around the fence and taught my horses to bump it. And they would just stand. Mac and Zoe both knew how to do this. when I would groom them, I would just like be in their paddock, and that's where I started teaching it. I would tie it to a tree branch or the fence, and they would touch it, and I would click and treat, and then I would just go about grooming them while they chewed, and then they would touch it again, and I would click and treat, and then you can take that anywhere, just like you could with the mat, tie it up, and the horse is like, oh my god, I know what to do here, and they're not just at a total loss with all the stuff that's going on, and they're like, I can just bump this thing, and then I get a treat. And for horses, eating is inherently relaxing. If the horse is eating, it's usually a good sign. They're calming down, they're trying to calm themselves, and so having your horse eat, it can bring down into that parasympathetic nervous system where they're relaxing, and then you're just desensitizing well, and you're teaching the horse that something that used to be really scary is not so scary anymore. So I would really recommend working through that, because I definitely understand how that is stressful for both you and the horse, and you're trying to do the right thing by making it easy on her, by trying to give her treats, but I think it might just be too much when you're already in the cross ties to just be giving her periodic treats. It's not working. I think you need to back down a step and try to be more systematic with it. Something that you could do is like write down, and even if you want to email me, like write down breaking down the behavior into the smallest possible, easiest thing that she can accomplish, like being in her pasture, standing still. Can she stand still in her pasture? And then working up from there, step by step by step. And if you want to break that down and then send it to me, I can like help you. Like if you missed a step, I can help you work through that. But yeah, I would be more than happy to. But I really think that you could help this horse. And like you said, you love her and she is so special to you. But again, another thing to address in your question here is, will it be confusing for her when you stop working with her? Ideally, if you can get her over the fear of the cross ties, it shouldn't matter that she's not getting reinforced. Usually, like, I mean, maybe, I don't know, that's so tricky. You can, once you get her over it, you can start backing off. I think that would probably be the most responsible thing to do. It kind of sucks, but if you know her next owner isn't going to use positive reinforcement, isn't going to use treats, then what you can do is, once you're really confident with her and she's standing in the cross ties asleep, you can just like slow down how frequently you're giving the treats until you back off to where maybe you're just giving really good scratches that are like really deep, really good, and then you can back off there to where just being in the cross ties is an inherently good thing. She just likes being in the cross ties, and that's something that you can do, like just like you condition the clicker. The clicker is conditioned to be a good thing. The horses like the sound of the clicker. I'm conditioned to be a good thing with most of my horses. When they see me, they come running because they're like, good things happen around you. So making the cross ties a good place to be, you can condition them to be somewhere that the horse likes to be, and then you can gradually back off and lessen the amount of reinforcement you're doing. And that way she won't be like pawing and expecting it from other people, which could lead them to start beating her in the cross ties, which could restart the whole cycle again. So that might be the most responsible thing to do. Ideally, you'd be able to pass on to her lease that the cross ties have been an issue for her and that they should be conscientious of that and learn how to clicker train and properly reinforce to maintain that behavior being good. But I think that the first option might be your best bet if you're pretty confident nobody's going to continue your work. So difficult situation. I hate that. Not owning your horse is difficult, and it can be really tricky, but I hope that helps. I wouldn't worry too much about like mixing negative reinforcement and all that, because horses can tell context clues. Like if you have a fanny pack on and then you get on and ride and that comes off, they're like, oh, okay, we're doing negative reinforcement now, we're riding. But when we're on the ground, she's got that bum bag on, and this means it's positive reinforcement time, So horses are really good at context clues, and they can pick that up pretty easily. Okay, we have approximately, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions left. I'm going to try to knock out some shorter ones here. Okay, listener Riley asks, my mare foaled in March unknowingly because I bought her pregnant in the fall. Oh, God. And the foal is quite wacko. She loves cuddles and scratches, but she also loves trying to play with you. When she kicks, it never hits me, but it's close enough that I feel unsafe. Do you know a way to prevent her from doing this, or is it something she's just going to have to grow out of? My trainer says take a whip with me and just smack her when she gets too close, but I really don't want to hurt her. Okay, so unfortunately, I don't exactly have the best answer to this question. Our colt Astro is been like this and has been like this since he came home from the vet. He is a psycho. And anytime you walk out there, he comes running and he is just ready to play. And so it can be difficult. And he foaled out in March as well, I believe. So he's calmed down a little bit, but he's still so mouthy. It's not like he wants to bite you. He just comes at you like open mouthed, like ah, ah, ah. And then I'm like, I don't want to hit him because I don't want to make him head shy, but I also don't want him to bite me. So I usually just end up kind of like putting my hand on his face and just like holding it there and not like pushing him away, and just like kind of hanging on to him and then scratching him when he shuts his mouth. With my other hand, like on his wither where he really likes it. So that's something you can do, is just to try and reward calm behavior. But I have also noticed that it is very difficult for me to walk away, because I'm all good as long as I'm standing there petting him and teaching him like how to walk on lead rope or pick up his feet. Like all of that is fine and great. But the second I try to walk away, it's like I have this little horse cutting me off or chasing me, bucking and rearing and stuff. And it is scary. I feel you, especially when it's big warm blood colts like those two. They're huge and they're bigger than our 5-month-old thoroughbred filly. So I'm like, yeah, I'm a little afraid of you when you come galloping at me and throwing your hind end around. I would rather not die today with a full-shaped hoof print in my forehead. So I definitely feel you there. It is scary. I don't agree with taking a whip necessarily, because, I mean, you want your foal to like you and be around you. But, I mean, if you genuinely feel unsafe and like you're going to get hurt, it might be okay to take it just for your own like mental benefit, and you don't have to hit them. You can just wave it around, and I'm sure that would be enough. But that, like I said, I don't really like to punish unless it's absolutely necessary. So, yeah, I mean, unless it just makes you feel better. I don't take one when I go out with our colts, but that's usually because I know that if they come running at me, I can usually just kind of like stand my ground, stand fully facing them, and put my hand out and just be like, no, and then they'll stop. And that's just kind of using body language to be like, that's not. And I'm not here to play. And they're usually okay with that. I'm not sure what realm that falls into as far as like punishment or anything goes, but I was kind of like, let's stop your energy, please. But maybe that is somewhat helpful. I know that's not exactly what you want, but as they get bigger and a little bit older and more mature, it can be easier to start working on that, especially when they can start taking treats. You can start like really reinforcing behavior. I think scratches are great, but sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome for me. Sometimes I much prefer giving treats, but everybody's different, so you might be really good with that. But I definitely would not undervalue scratches at this early stage. Like with Astro, I've really been working on his nippiness. So I hope that helps some way. But yeah, I mean, just when you're working with her, try and keep your energy really low. And if you are going to like exit and you feel like she's going to chase you, maybe you can just like take one step at a time, like plant ahead, not get out of there when you like absolutely must go, but plan your sessions when you're working with her for, if it takes you 30 minutes to get back to the fence, plan for that, and plan when you're working with her to 30 minutes out, start heading back towards the fence and taking one step, and she can come with you, and you can keep working on things just kind of as you get there, and then at the end you can sort of slip out. Usually with our horses, because they're in a big field, I get to a certain point and they're like, I'm a little too far away from mom, peace, and that works. But I hope that helps somewhat. I also have not totally figured out the solution to that, so sorry that I'm not super helpful there. Listener Ava asks, so I've just gotten into positive reinforcement. I have a question. I have a quarter horse mare that gains weight very easily. If I don't consistently work her, she gains weight very fast. She stays in the stall during the day and gets turned out at night and gets minimal feed and hay. As I'm learning and researching about positive reinforcement, I haven't been working with her and she's gained weight. So my question is, what do I do with her during this downtime? I don't want to keep using negative reinforcement, which was what she was originally trained with, but I don't want to start using positive reinforcement until I'm educated and have a good idea of it and everything that goes into it. Okay, so here, this is something that I experienced with Zoe after she got back from colic surgery. I started working with positive reinforcement and doing all that jazz. But then she started to founder because we had really good grass that year. And she got really heavy, and her feet were getting screwed up. And I was like, I have to exercise her. Like, we backed off her feet, but I was like, she's got to get some exercise. And so that it just might be something you have to do out of necessity until you can get like a really good feed regimen worked out, to where maybe your horse only gets hay and like a ration balancer or something. If he's gaining weight super easily, you might not even need to feed grain, and you can just do like a ration balancer type of thing where you're just making sure he gets the nutrients, he's not getting in the hay. But some horses only ever need hay and alfalfa. If it's really good hay that has all the nutrients you need, I would test the grass first or the hay, make sure they're getting what they need. And that's where the ration balancers and supplements and things like that, vitamins, come into play. But that could help potentially. But also, because I also would like to say horses are not designed to eat 2 square meals a day or 3 square meals a day and just eating grain. They're designed to eat over long periods of time. So a natural forage diet is preferred, but that's not what I'm able to do here. So that's the reason that I'm not doing it, because I don't have the means. But if you could, I would go for that. But also, like, I would encourage you not to feel bad about needing to use negative reinforcement training. There is a way to do it that is kind and soft, and if it is, you have to ask yourself the ethical question, like, do I either let my horse sit and founder until I can figure out his nutrition, or do I have to exercise him so he keeps his health? Because we can't explain to our horses that this is, that lunging is going to be the answer to fixing their health problems. So sometimes you just have to make that executive decision. And if that's the only way you have the means to now, then I think that you should do that. I obviously don't encourage like chasing him and whipping him and just like beating the snot out of him until he, lunges in a circle. But if he lunges politely, like, I would go ahead and do that. Or if you need to ride, you can do that as well. But just having some sort of exercise program is okay. Like, you can do light rides, or like if you're really uncomfortable using negative reinforcement, like until you figure out that balance, you can do really light rides or just lunge and try to keep that weight off while you figure everything out. But something that I like that Alexander Curlin says, I don't entirely agree with everything she says, but I do respect her as one of the first people that started clicker training with horses, is that don't throw out something without having something to replace it. So you don't necessarily have to not work with your horse at all because you don't know how to do everything. And it can get messy and tricky when you're trying to overlap and stuff. And I definitely threw the baby out with the bathwater. I was like, I can't even pull Zoe out of her paddock because I don't want to use negative reinforcement. And that's okay too. That is an okay mindset to have, but it is annoying when you're like, I don't really know how to train these things, so I can't do anything yet. So I totally get you there. But if it is in the best interest of the welfare of your horse, then I think you are justified in still using negative reinforcement if it is something you are comfortable continuing doing. I hope that answers that question. Okay, one of the last shorter ones before we get to the 2 last long ones here. Listener Bianca asks, my question is, how do you know when your horse understands the clicker if they have always been super polite around food? This is a good question. Rules of the game, for everyone listening, rules of the game is what Elise B.A. or Muckenstrom Bayard, that's what she calls like manners, having the horse like turn his head away or have it in the center of his body when you're working around food, anti-mugging behavior. So she's calling it the rules of the game, I assume, from reading Elise or watching her videos. So rules of the game took about 5 minutes to teach my horse, but I'm wondering if he hasn't associated the clicker with reinforcement because he was already polite around food, so his introduction to clicker training was so quick. Sometimes when I click, my horse is not interested in getting reinforcement. Other times he pricks his ears and he looks at me like he's waiting for it. How do I know if he truly understands what it means? If you want more detail, and I do, I recently started using positive reinforcement to train him. I'd only had him for about a week and he was super polite around food. What I'm using is his reinforcement because of it took about 5 minutes for him to understand the rules of the game. However, I'm not sure if he truly understands clicker. I'm using a mixture of pressure and release and positive reinforcement and groundwork because those are the cues he understands. He's not always responsive to the click, though. Like, he doesn't know what it means, but 2 minutes later I'll click for a behavior again, and he'll prick his ears and look to me for the reinforcement. I know there are loads of books out there, and I'm slowly making my way through them, but I haven't found anything relating to this yet. Okay, so the first thing I want to address is when you're first learning about positive reinforcement and you're first learning how to train it, I would really recommend not using negative reinforcement in conjunction. I would only do that once you feel like you are a savvy enough clicker trainer to be able to tell what's really reinforcing your horse. Because if you're pulling on his lead and he walks with you, and then when he takes a step forward, you click and treat, you don't really know which one is really reinforcing his behavior. So that's a very basic example, but it gets messy. And there's also the concept, like earlier mentioned, when the listener was like, I don't know if I should use both. The danger with using both is something called the poison cue. Oh my God, what's his name? Jesus. What's the rest of his name? Rosales Ruiz. Jesus Rosales Ruiz. He is a professor at University of North Texas, and he's the one that did this. Him and Mary. Oh my God, what's Mary's last name? I met her. I know her. Her last name is escaping me, and for sake of time, I will not sit here and try to figure it out, but that's going to irritate me. They worked together on this project of learning the poison cue, and you can look it up and read on it. I think he has a DVD out on it, and you can do all that research. But essentially, it's kind of like the human scenario is if your boss came up behind you at work and tapped you on the shoulder and gave no expressional cues, but said, I need you to see me in my office after work. And you were like, okay, and they walked away. You have no idea if you're going to get fired or if you're going to get a raise or a promotion. You have no idea what that's about. And you're going to sit and you're going to think about that and be anxious the entire time. So that can be what happens if you poison a cue with horses and with dogs or whatever you're training. If the animal doesn't know if they're going to get punished or if they're going to get negatively reinforced or if they're going to get positively reinforced, then you create a lot of stress and you create a completely different animal who is unaware and unsure of what is coming next. And then that creates a lot of anxiety in the animal. And that's why people caution novice trainers to not use both together, because then you can really further confuse what the clicker means. And then you'll have to switch sounds because the horse will have paired it and it will have poisoned it. And there's a whole study done on it. This is why it's called the poison cue. But you can poison reinforcers and stimuli as well. If you're clicking and the horse doesn't know if he's going to get punished or reinforced, then the clicker will become a sign of you don't know what's coming, and it'll just be anxiety inducing. So I would really encourage you, listener Bianca, to refrain from using both until you have made your way through some of those books, and just keep those sessions separate. Like when you're riding, just ride. Like I said earlier, you can take the fanny pack off before you get on, and you can just really start making that differentiated to the horse. Or you can keep the sessions entirely separate, and you can do positive reinforcement before, give the horse a 10-minute break, and then go get them, and then tack them up, ride, turn them out, do another session, So you can keep that all separate. But to answer your specific question of how do you know if a super polite horse gets it? So we actually had a horse here, and he still is ours, but he's out in training because I don't do eventing training really at the moment. So he's out being trained by someone else. But when he was here, I was working with him, and he was super polite around food. He was also a little bit head shy, so he wasn't too keen on being in your space because he was, kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think, because I know Sunny, my boss, does not allow any of her racehorses to get hit or ear twitched or smacked in the face or anything like that. She will light anyone on fire and does that to her horses because she's like, I want them to be able to cuddle with me when they come off the track, so they better not be head shy. And Ruler, he knew what to expect from Sunny, but me as a new person, he was like, I don't really know. He's a little wary of me touching his head. So he was super polite around food. And So I've experienced this where it's hard to tell. You're like, are you actually staying out of my space, or is that just how you are? So don't stop reinforcing for that behavior. He's doing the right thing. So like, props to him for that. And, you know, when you start working on other behaviors, make sure that you're still reinforcing him out of your space so that you're, you know, simultaneously being like, you're getting the reward for what you just did, but also you're getting a reward for staying in the right place. So there's that. But something else you could do is try target training. So you don't have to start introducing what the clicker means or with the rules of the game. It's not a rule that you have to start there. Generally, I like to start with target training and then do rules of the game, because target training can be a little bit clearer, because you give the horse a visual task, like you must touch this thing and then you'll get a treat, rather than the rules of the game can be a little bit ambiguous because you're expecting the horse to read your body language and then move off based on that. So if the horse has prior experience of like, this is an object that you need to touch that. And then like, while you're teaching the horse that, you're still feeding them out of your space. You're stepping towards them so that they're not having to come into you, and you're feeding them out of your space. So you can take a step towards them, feed them all the way at the length of your arm. Depending on how long your arms are, you might have to take a few steps and get all the way to them so that they're not coming to you. And even if they come into your space, still feed them out. And that way they learn that like, oh, there's really no point in coming into your space because I'm just going to get fed exactly where I was. So that's the goal. But another way that people like to start clicker training is to what they call loading the clicker. And that is where you just click and feed, click and feed, click and feed, click and feed. And that just tells the horse that the clicker means food is coming and to expect food from the clicker. That's not entirely my favorite way to start. I know people swear up and down by that, and I totally get it, and I understand why you would do that because it's the simplest thing. But I don't like to really start off like that. Because in my personal opinion, I like to establish that the clicker means two things right off the bat. It means that was right and food is coming, and I get that can possibly cross the threshold of like being too, asking for too much. But if you do it right, then it can't be. So like if you hold out the target when you're starting target training and the horse looks in its direction, click and treat. And then the horse is like, I looked over there and then I got this weird sound and I got food. And then when you hold out the target again, the horse looks, you click and treat. He's like, okay, I'm looking at this thing, I'm hearing a noise, and food is coming. And then when you represent the target and then he reaches out to touch it and you click and treat, the horse is like, if I touch this thing, that sound is made and that means food is coming. So the horse is looking to make the sound happen so that food comes. And that's how the clicker training works and how the clicker gets conditioned as a secondary reinforcer, because food, water, shelter, companionship, those are all primary reinforcers. So, you know, in training, we predominantly use food and scratches because those are things that we can do. We cannot necessarily provide companionship as we are not horses. I mean, whatever. It's not the same as like being in a herd. But, you know, so you can break it down and make it very simple for the horse. And that might be a better way for you, Bianca, to work with your horse who's already super polite around food. And that's great. I mean, that's one less thing you have to do. But if you really want to make sure he understands the clicker and he's not super ambivalent on it, I would do target training and I would eliminate using negative reinforcement with it as you're starting out. I think it's totally fine to use them in conjunction if it's done well, but it is tricky and it is complicated to do them well. And I'm not saying that to discourage anybody. I'm more so saying it to encourage you to get to a point where you're confident before moving into trying to do all these different things at once. Get really good at one, and then you can start combining, because most of us are already pretty good at negative reinforcement. So I hope that helps. Let me make sure I answered all of that. He's not, okay, let's make sure release. He's not always responsive to the click, like he doesn't understand what it means, and 2 minutes later, click for the behavior again, he'll prick his ears and look to me for reinforcement. Yeah, so, I mean, that's essentially what we've got to do here. And also, if he's pricking his ears and looking at you for reinforcement, that probably means he doesn't understand the rules of the game, and he might just be polite. Zoe does it sometimes, but for the most part, she knows that when I click, to assume a position, and she puts her head in a place, and I can see she's looking at me out of the corner, like out of the side of her eye. Well, the eyes are on the side of their head, but like I can see that she's looking directly at me, and she's got like an ear on me, but her head is straight. coming out of between her shoulders. So for the most part, sometimes I get a little lax, and if she turns around, I'll feed her, but that's because I know she's not going to bite me or get muggy or anything like that. But that is, again, an intuition thing that comes with having done this for a while. But I do not recommend feeding the horse in your space until you are confident, and even then, it's still a lax trainer thing to do, and I don't recommend it. Sorry, I had to take a drink of water. Anyway, hope that helps. Try targeting. That's what I like to do first, because it tells the horse, establishes that like the clicker means something and that food is on its way. And then you'll have a horse that really understands it altogether, not just like sort of an ambiguous thing like the feeding out of your space can be. And then when you do that, when you're in target training, and then when you keep feeding out of your space, it can kind of give them a hint for when you start training manners and rules of the game, that's where they need to be. Okay. So next question, and these are the last two questions, and they are rather long. One of them includes 5 questions, but they are numbered, so that is very nice. It helps my brain. Love organized people. Sorry for the burp. Oh my god, we're almost at an hour and a half. It's crazy. Might make it to 2 hours with this one. Sorry for the burp. I'm not editing that out. Listener Emily asks, I have Lisa Percheron paint mare named Daisy, and I got to ride her 3 days per week, including a lesson. I do wear spurs with her, and I carry a dressage whip in our ride. I never use a dressage whip unless I absolutely have to, and even then I'm uncomfortable using it. So I would say don't ride with it. I use the spurs to keep her on her forehand, or keep her forward. I was like, forehand, what? But they are only used lightly and with care. I don't want her to shy away from my leg and be afraid of my leg in any way. She's a very lazy horse, can be extremely slow and hard to keep a forward pace on. So I understand. I completely understand where you're coming from. But to me, spurs are kind of a quick fix solution. Spurs and whips in conjunction, I mean. To me, I am not a huge fan of using whips unless it is not used in a sharp way. But like if you take a whip and you hit yourself with it, try and make that not hurt but still be effective. It's very difficult to control the amount of ouch in a whip. But in spurs, it's a lot easier because it's a lot slower, more subtle pressure. So I'm more of an advocate for using spurs than I am whips. But that's not to say I don't use them when I lunge, but that's more as a chasey thing, not as a hitty thing, which is arguably still bad. I mean, like, you're scaring a horse into running forward, but some of them I must lunge. That's part of my job. Not my favorite thing in the world, but sometimes it must be done. Especially like in the earlier case we were talking about, like horses that are overweight and must exercise. Like, it is for the better, and if we're going to have to do it, I would prefer to, kind of scare them into going forward and then immediately stop than hit them with it and cause pain and fear. Okay, so she's lazy and you have to use spurs. My suggestion to that would be to attempt to fix her diet to help her not to be quite so lazy. Sometimes it is just a personality with a horse, especially being like a drafty kind of animal. They tend to be a little bit on the more docile side, which can be frustrating. And, I forgot to say this one on my little spur rant, that I think that it is a lot more humane to use a poke of a spur than to beat your legs against the side of your horse. Because if you're highly against using spurs, but when you're on a slower horse and you're kicking the dog shit out of them, like, that's not more humane than using spurs, in my opinion. And spurs usually only have to use once, and then they're pretty sharp off your leg. So, I see the debate there, I really do, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, let's go with the more humane, less invasive option here. But yeah, so there's that. During my lessons, we have introduced flying changes, and I'm not sure if I agree with how my trainer wants to teach them. It seems to me that my trainer and some of my friends think too, that the best way to get across something to your horse is negative reinforcement. We started going up the long side of the arena, which is 3/4 of the way down, looping. Oh my god, it just started raining like super hard here. That's crazy. I didn't think it was supposed to rain today. Anyway, sorry, that was like a really detailed part of the message that I just like noped out of. We started going up the long side of the arena about 3/4 of the way down, looping in a 180-degree turn and leg yielding back to the rail. Okay, so like you're doing like a turn onto the center line and then Yeah, and then leg yielding back. It's kind of like a shallow serpentine, but leg yielding. And then when you hit the rail, you whack her with the whip in your outside hand, and she should somewhat understand what I'm asking. Yeah, whatever. We only did that a few times, and then we moved to doing the changes on the diagonal. My trainer told me to turn onto the diagonal and then ask for a leg yield. Then when I got to the rail on the opposite side, to whack her with the whip as hard as I can. And I'm not exaggerating, she actually said as hard as you can. Now, at first, I thought this was the only way to do things, but I started listening to your podcast and my viewpoint changed a lot. I want to stop using the whip so forcefully and maybe only tapping her behind to start, but once she picks it up, I want to get rid of the whip entirely. I want to know what you think about the way I'm trying to teach Daisy and what, in your opinion, I should change. If you aren't sure about it, then could you recommend something to read or something that might help me? Okay, so, or something to watch that might help me, yeah. Okay, so, I mean, I have not mastered lead changes using positive reinforcement yet, nor am I positive that I ever will. And that is a big movement to ask, and I know that there are plenty of trainers out there that can do it. I know Georgia Bruce is very good with like high-level dressage movements. She's Click with Horses on most platforms. She has Facebook pages and all that good stuff, and she's competitive and still uses clicker training and is one of the most kind riders I've ever seen in my life. I look up to her so much in that regard. But she... yeah, she can train those things. I cannot. So I can't sit here and tell you how to step-by-step train a lead change through positive reinforcement. And while I am not super keen on giving advice for negative reinforcement, mostly because I'm not entirely sure where I stand, my opinion on it has been subject to change in the past, so I'm kind of like hesitant to really talk on it too much. But in the spirit of preventing smacking to get a lead change, I would encourage more focus on like using other, I don't know why I'm so spacing out my words here, like other forms of helping her get the lead change. Something that often helps horses a lot is poles. Like if you have a pole on a diagonal and maybe you do like kind of a serpentine and you come around and then you take like a 90-degree turn to the pole, and then over the pole you move your new outside leg back, open your new inside rein, close the new outside rein, which was the old inside rein, and ask for the lead change that way. That's been really helpful for me. That's how I've always taught them, is either over poles or over fences. I'll never forget, I was riding under an instructor, and it was the most helpful thing because Bo, my last horse, had so much trouble with changes, and arguably because he was not necessarily the most well put together guy, and I did not ride him in a proper frame that really would have helped his conformation. But when we would jump, this coach was like, you know, say you're cantering on the right lead, and he was like, when you go over the fence, you switch to having your right hand be closed, open your left rein, put your weight in your right stirrup. Not that you're like leaning off, but your left leg, or oh my God, your right leg is back, and you've got some weight in that stirrup because you're changing all of your right side to being the new outside. So like, you know, like maybe the stride out as you're taking off, so that the horse has a clear, like, this is the lead I would like you to land on, you know, not just like in the air, you're like, okay, change. But you're giving them hints that like on the backside, you're going to be turning that direction. And then the horses will often gather themselves because they know they'd like to be balanced, and they'll land on that lead. So sometimes it helps to use a jump because they've already got that upward momentum, because the reason lead changes is so hard is because the horses have to load onto their hind end and lift their front end and change. And so if you're already going over a jump, that makes that a lot easier and a lot clearer to the horse, rather than just like, you know, jerking them sideways really fast. It's a common one. So they like fall over, and in order to catch themselves, they have to change leads. Or, like your trainer's having you do is to smack them. It can be easier. And I mean, you could probably present to your trainer, just be like, I have really been taking are training seriously, and I really want to get good at lead changes, and I've been watching a lot of videos, and I really want to try doing it over a jump. I think that might help clarify with Daisy a little bit, so she's already going over a jump, and then I can just work on communicating with my aides to change direction, and then eventually we can lower it from like 18 inches to an X rail, and then to a pole on the ground, and then eventually to no pole, and then she'll just understand the cue. And I don't even know if I would touch the whip issue, because sometimes that can cause people to go into defense, because they're like, oh, we're not being abusive, oh my god, and then they start focusing on the wrong thing, and then you're like, and then you've lost the argument entirely, because they're like, no, we're not doing that, it's not your horse. So yeah, I mean, just I would approach it from like, I'm really wanting to do this right and well, and I've watched a lot of videos, and I was wondering if we could try this way. I don't mean any disrespect or anything like that. I want to try this and then see if they'll let you. Okay. Next question, still from Emily. Another question I have relates to budgeting. I was curious what products you use for your positive reinforcement training. I'm considering starting it with Daisy, but I'm not sure if I can afford it and if she will catch on to it, as we will only do it twice per week. Could you tell me what products you use on a day-to-day training basis and where you got them? Okay, so I get this question a lot. You guys can go to JETEquiTheory.com. It's JETEquiTheory. I'm not sure if I spelled that super helpfully, but it's Jet. Those are my initials, and then EquiTheory, and then theory.com. And then on there, there is a tab called Positive Reinforcement Help. It's plus our help. Hover over that, and then there's a tab under that that says favorite products, or you could just click on it and it'll take you to a page, and there will be like a little list, and it'll say like positive reinforcement glossary, positive reinforcement resources, and favorite products. The resources and the products pages are going to be your best friends. That's where I have compiled everything that I have used and read and listened to get started on. In all fairness, I have not read all of the books yet because I am very busy all the time. But you can use that, use some of those books to read, and the products listed on that page. I have the alfalfa pellets that I use to train listed there. I get them from Tractor Supply. My boss supplies them, so I don't have to pay for them, but that is what I use. And then I have a bum bag, and I use my mouth for a clicker, but I really recommend starting off with a tangible clicker, as that can make your timing a lot better than trying to coordinate your mouth as well. So yeah, hopefully that helps that. Lastly, I want to stop using the dressage whip when I ride, but I don't think it is because I don't think it's necessary at all, but I don't know how to approach my trainer on this topic. She's a really good person, but she, like all trainers, can be intimidating, and I have a hard time talking to her sometimes. Should I bring it up to her? What should I say? I'm at a bit of a loss here. In the past, not that I'm necessarily recommending you do this, in the past with things like that I have had an issue with, I just don't use them. I don't know if you're half leasing this horse from your trainer. That can be a bit of a different circumstance. But when I've, been riding my horses in the past, like especially when I was like 14 or 15, nose bands were really a big deal for me. I hated riding them. I still hate them. I don't like them. I don't see a point. And so like my trainers always got so mad at me, and they'd be like, put a nose band on, and I'd be like, okay. And then the next lesson they'd be like, why don't you have a nose band on? And I'd be like, I forgot. And then eventually they just were like, oh my God, she's not going to do it. Like, we'll just leave it as a non-issue. And then I would have to put it on before shows, and that was it. And then I wouldn't ride with it otherwise. And they were like, okay, it's your horse, whatever. And I stopped riding with the dressage whip, as well. And when my coaches would be like, I need you to bring out a whip next time, I'd be like, okay, and then I wouldn't do it. And I'm not necessarily recommending that is the best way to go about things, but I don't know, it is an option. But I also would like to think that most trainers, if you approach it well, you have to be very tactful, because obviously if you offend people or you hurt their feelings, they're going to get defensive and they're not going to hear your side. So you have to be tactful and diplomatic with it. You don't want to insult. So yeah, I think that, if you just approach like what I said earlier with maybe trying to incorporate a jump and then work on your lead changes that way, you could even, ask, just be like, could we do like a course that's specifically designed to help us with our lead changes? We could set up one that's got some turns, not super sharp because you're not trying to rip the horse off balance, but just ones so that you can communicate to the horse before you take off, like which direction you're going to turn on landing. And then when they're in the air, they're like, we're going that way, I should probably land on that lead. That could work as well. But also something I should say, if you're noticing that the horse like cannot do a flying change, there might be something wrong to look into. Like I was talking about with Maze, she had that shoulder issue and she couldn't physically pick up the lead. So there's that. I would probably just, get through the lead change lesson. And then after that, just like stop carrying one. And, if she says anything, just be like, I just don't necessarily think that she needs it. And I'm not entirely sure that like I would really feel comfortable using one. I'm okay with spurs. But I think that we can ride her without carrying a whip. I understand that some people like to carry them for just in cases, but I think we can probably solve it without the whip if that is okay with you. You can just be frank, and I get it's scary. It is so scary. I feel you. I'm also one that is intimidated by authority, so I feel you on that one 100%. But usually sometimes if you're like, I'm just really not comfortable using a whip, and if you're going to insist that I need to use a whip, maybe I need to find a lease horse that doesn't require one, that's maybe a little bit more forward, so that we can avoid this issue altogether. Or maybe I need to it's tricky because I don't necessarily think that you should threaten like leaving barns, but I mean, it might be something to do on your own without necessarily discussing it with your trainer, because I don't think being like, well, I'll change barns is necessarily a good idea, but just being like, if that's something that we can't work past, then I might need to look elsewhere for training. You might just have to do that on your own. But I also understand that can be difficult. But I hope that helps someone. I know how defeating it can feel. It is a very hard situation to be in. It is very hard. I'm a Neanderthal. I'm going to take a drink. And my water is done. But good news, folks. We are on the last question here. This is my first going to be 2-hour long episode. I hope that you guys are like, whoa, bonus episode, and that's also hella long. I'm hoping that this won't be a regular thing, because oh my god, I'm sitting here like stressed out about the amount of homework that I have to do, and that I have not done, and it is already 9:30, and I'm trying to get my sleep schedule fixed so that I can be more productive. But I'm really hoping that I can, by doing 2 episodes a week, that I can like kind of break this up a little bit, and if necessary, then I can do 1 episode one week and then 2 episodes some weeks. But I think that if I do 2 episodes, it'll probably be on Tuesdays and Fridays. That way, they are spaced out enough to where it'll give you guys a chance to listen to the first one, and then on Friday you'll have the next one. I think that's probably what I'm going to do. Just that way it's half and half, I think. I think that's halfway. Yeah. I think, right? That's Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, I think, unless I just totally screwed that up. The days of the week are odd. You can't have a perfect half, whatever. Okay, so on to the next one. Anonymous listener asks 5 different questions, so I will try to be concise because there are a lot. Number 1, I'm working to incorporate positive reinforcements and rewards to riding and lunging, but if my horse knows I have treats, he will not move, and he will just keep his head facing me, even if I move myself or just wait. Okay, so to address this, it's a little bit difficult to give a straight answer to this without like being able to see what's happening, but if that is the case, in circumstances like that, the horse may just not be educated enough with positive reinforcement to know to offer behaviors. Like if I get on Zoe and she just stands and I don't reward her, she's going to try something else. She might take a step forward, and she also knows leg cues, and she would step forward if I applied my leg, and then I would click and treat for that. So for that, I would hold off. Like I said to the last listener, I don't know, I just like, sorry about that. But you're trying to incorporate it into rewards and writing, and the way it's worded makes me feel like maybe you haven't been like super familiar with it just yet. So maybe just hold off and separate them until you get really savvy with it. Because it sounds like it's confusing your horse, and, if that is the case and you like really want to try this and, combining them together, I would sit down and pull up and like create a lesson plan. So that you're not just going out there and when he's stopping with his head facing you, you're not just like, okay, I don't know what to do now. That way you can have a plan and you'll know what to do if that does happen, and that you're not just like sitting there not knowing what to do. Next question, number 2, when riding, I put light pressure and not ramp up the amount of pressure on the rein to turn right, for example, but he will push into the pressure and instead turns left. So now our rides just feel like a constant fight. Sometimes I'll just let him go where he wants instead, lol. He does this with a bit or bitless. I don't know how to fix it or even how it started. Like I said, I don't like riding with I guess you mean positive reinforcement yet. Okay, so this used to be a huge problem I had with Zoe. Oh my god, it is so fucking annoying. It's so frustrating because you're like, okay, I'm trying to be light with you, and they just rip their heads the opposite direction, and you're like, okay, I guess we're going that way now. Something you can do in those situations, if they're ignoring that pressure, is when they do rip their heads the opposite direction, you can go ahead and turn that direction, but just go all the way back around and then go the other way. Sometimes that can work. You can be like, okay, we're going this way. Or if he's like trying to look at something, go ahead, check that thing out, see what's going on, and then go back. Another thing that you can do is from the ground, you can start reteaching rein cues. You can teach him to look one direction, or you can use a verbal cue. And you can reward for that, and you can put a bridle on, and then you can transfer the cue, and or if you're all about simplicity, not that I necessarily recommend this one, but it could work. If you have a bridle on and you're not like planning to ride or anything, you're just on the ground, and you have a bridle on and you pull on one side, just like lift the rein, and if the horse moves in that direction at all, release and then click and treat. And then do that until you've got them moving, and you can lead them in a circle, and same the other direction. And then you can try and transfer that from to the saddle as well, and just really make it clear. Or if you don't want to confuse using positive reinforcement, you can just do that from the ground. You can teach him to lead and soften to either rein direction, but you'll have to be like really diligent. And how I would do it if I was going to use strictly negative reinforcement is I would start on the ground with the bridle on. Firstly, making sure that the horse has been chiropracted and that the neck is okay, and that there's not any reason that he doesn't want to turn that way. Often their ribs get out too, and then that can affect their neck and wanting to turn and bend their barrel. And making sure that his teeth have been done recently, so there's no problems going on in his mouth or anything like that. After eliminating that, then I would put the bridle on and stand in the pasture. Again, this is if I'm not using positive reinforcement. I would stand at his shoulder and ask that he turn right, per se. So I'm standing on his right side, and I ask that he turn right. And he might swing his haunches out, and that's okay, but I'm going to look for him to soften his neck or his eye or his nose in any inch in the direction that I am asking him to soften. And the second he does that, release. And this is going to take a really keen eye and for you to really pay attention, because you're going to really want to be consistent with this. Because if he feels like he's giving to you and you're not releasing, then he's like, well, I don't know what the right answer is, because the release tells me that was the right thing to do, but you're not releasing. You keep asking. So, hello, Archie. Whoa, big meows. He says hello. Furthering on that, if he moves his nose in any inch, you're going to release and just relax for a moment and then ask again. And maybe you'll get a little bit further, and so on and so forth, until you've got him, really reaching around. And then you can add walking. You can get him walking beside you. I wouldn't try to pull him and get him to walk while you're in the same spot that you've been doing all the standing flexing work. What I would do is just start walking beside him and then gradually ask. And then when you ask him to turn his nose slightly, don't expect for the full thing that you just got standing, because you're going to have to lower your criteria and ask for less, because you've introduced something new, which is moving forward. So you're just going to take it all the way back to basics and make it really simple, make sure it's clear, find holes in the training and correct them. And so then you're going to start walking, and then ask him to turn his nose, and then when he does, release. And then you work on that and getting him to flex while he's walking. And then the next step would be to introduce turning. So you can step your body away from him, and then instinctually he should probably step towards you because he realizes you're turning. but don't get in front of him because you'll block him from turning, so stay at his shoulder and that sort of thing. So hopefully you'd be able to work up from there, and then you can transfer that to the saddle, because then you know his rein cues are really clear. But again, in the saddle, don't ask for too much too fast, because you might confuse him, or he might be like, you're not releasing, what's the right answer, I don't know what to do. So just take it slow and try to reintroduce it. Again, usually I think that horses might be doing that as like a discomfort response. Something is up, whether they're not being reinforced enough, because, you know, they're not getting that release. You keep pulling or whatever, or somebody in the past has kept pulling, or, you know, it just doesn't feel good because they've got something going on in their neck or something. I don't know. Zoe was like that because she came off the track and had never really experienced much like really advanced turning. You know, just sort of the usual walking to the track, being on the track, you know, it wasn't a whole lot of like, I need you to flex this direction and bend in a 90-degree turn. So that was a bit difficult, and I was not the best rider at the time, and I was not conscientious of how negative reinforcement worked. Okay, question number 3. I haven't been able to find the sound on the internet anywhere, and I don't know what it means. The best way to describe it is a honking noise similar to a horse that was galloping and upset, but he hasn't been galloping. He's just walking with his head low and relaxed. Huh? I don't know what it means. Best way to describe it is a honking noise similar to a horse that's galloping and upset, but he hasn't been galloping. He's just walking with his head low. Like roaring? That's the only thing I can think of. Walking with his head low and relaxed. Or is it like oh, you know what? It might be, because this is a gelding, it might be his gaskin in his back leg. It can make that sound. Or when the sheath needs to be cleaned, like maybe he has a bean in where his penis goes, in a sheath, that can make sound sometimes. So I would look up like horse that needs a sheath cleaned and see if that's maybe the sound. It's kind of like a whooping noise. I don't know how to describe that either. But yeah, it usually happens most when they're trotting. But I mean, if you want to like take a video of it and send it to me, or if you can like try and recreate it with your mouth, then you can like take an audio file and send it to me and just be like, this is weird, but here. Yeah, I'm not sure how to help with that. But if it is the whooping sound, I would have a vet out and just make sure that his sheath is clean, whatever. For the last, or number 4, for the last one relating to my horse, that is one that's more frustrating and embarrassing for me, is why does my horse know how to lead but will randomly stop for up to 10 minutes and not move? Sometimes it's just because he wants to grass, but most of the time not. He's been at this barn for 2 years, so it's not a new place, and he doesn't usually get spooked. That sounds a lot like this similar question. I think it was the first one I answered, when the horse like doesn't want to walk out of his stall. It's usually because they don't want to leave the place that they've been, or go back to the place. Because for me, Zoe has this habit, it's real bad, and Bo did it too. They would not walk down to the arena with me. It was so annoying, because I'm like, oh my god, I do not want to stop here for 10 minutes while you stare at nothing, or just stop and like look around, or stop and pull me to the grass. They used to do all of those things because they didn't want to go to the arena. They did not. And so the whole time we're walking there, they're just like stopping. And I go sideways and pull and go sideways, and then eventually get them to take a step, and then I soften, and then they stop immediately again. I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to just like haul you all the way to the arena, but it's because they're not happy with something that's happening. Either it's painful or scary or uncomfortable, whatever. You said this horse isn't spooking. So it's probably he doesn't want to go wherever he's going. The flip side to this is, Zoe now, very easy to lead out of her pasture. She's not easy to get back to her pasture. If I lead her out to groom her in the cross ties, or to take her out to the field to work with her, or to the arena to work with her, she doesn't want to go back. She stops the entire way back, and it's so annoying, because she knows that when I get done training, I'm going to turn her out into the field, and I'm going to just put her away, and we're going to be done. And she doesn't want to do that. She wants to keep working, because she's getting treats, and she enjoys it. And so, it's like, okay, great. And if I were a really stellar trainer, I would make going back to the paddock something really good. I would end my sessions in the arena early, and then go back to her paddock, and then keep working with her there. And that way she's not like, I don't want to go back there because it's not going to be as fun. So that is something to consider there. I feel like I answered that thoroughly enough the first time, so I'm not going to get into that again. Okay. Number 5, I also feel like a bit of a bad horsey caretaker because I'm not able to give them anything or everything they need to live a good life, but I'm doing my best. Sorry, I just want to interject, but I'm going to keep reading. And was wondering what your option would be of what is the better choice. Oh, opinion. That's what it should be. It says option. He can either be in a pasture with horses on a hill, but he only gets fed twice a day without a hay net, or be in a large stall / run-in type that is outside, can have hay net twice a day, but would be living by himself with only other horses next to him. It's so hard to choose over what he physically needs, what he mentally, emotionally needs. Those are the same thing. I guess physically you're talking about like hay. Or are neither of those options good enough? Okay, so, there are actually 6 questions in this. Okay, let's reevaluate here. Be in a pasture with other horses on a hill, but he only gets fed twice a day without a hay net. Or he's in a large stall / run-in type that is outside, can have a hay net twice a day, but would be living by himself with other horses next to him. Would he be getting grain in this situation as well? Because for me, the first option is better. I think that buddies are always better. Horses are not built to be alone. I get like having buddies around him, but I mean, it's not necessarily the same as being with them in a herd. And like, I mean, if the hill has grass and hay, or has good quality grass, then he doesn't need hay theoretically. So, I mean, I would pick that option. And I mean, if you notice that he's starting to like, lose weight and slip a little bit, you can bring him up to where he would be getting constant hay. But getting a hay net twice a day is not necessarily enough, because that's what Zoe gets. Zoe gets grain, hay net twice a day, and has a field of grass. And they'll eat the hay net standing in 1 hour. And they get 4 pretty condensed flakes, and they'll eat it in an hour. So it's not really enough. To have an option to be able to graze all day is better, in my opinion. But my ponies do, so that is my opinion on that. Again, don't feel super guilty. You have to do the best you can with what you can afford and what's around you. Like, I mean, if you had your horse in a complete dry lot and were not able to feed them, then it is time to get rid of the horse, give it to somebody who can take care of it. But in this situation, you're doing the best you can. You really care about your horse. You're trying to be an ethical owner and, make the right choices for your horses. So don't fault yourself too much. It's a big undertaking. It is a lot of work. So try to go a little bit easier on yourself. Number 6, this is more a random question, but do you know how Emma Massingale trains, and do you agree with how she trains? I'm going to look her up really fast. I'm pretty sure they do connection training, correct? No? Of course their website would not say, not website, Instagram. That's where I always go for information like that. Oops, I just knocked my thingamajig off. Oh, I just got charged for Amazon Prime. That sucks so bad. Okay, visit our website. I think they're the connection training people. Pretty sure it's Emma and somebody else. I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so I took a pee break and I took a moment to look up Emma Massingale. I was wrong. She is not one of the connection training. That is Emma and Hannah, I think. Oh my god, I've already forgotten if that is their names. I hate that because I would really like to read their book and maybe join their program at some point, but that is not something that has been in the cards for me financially. But yeah, I really respect what connection training does. But looking at Emma Massingale, she seems to be one of the kinder, more polite, more educated upper-level riders, which is really exciting and encouraging. But she still does use quite a bit of force and natural horsemanship techniques and things like that. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily something that I'm like super proud, or keen to be like, yeah, I want to do that. Because a lot of things like natural horsemanship can be really, really flashy, and so can positive reinforcementship. I mean, like, look at It's Crunch Time. Her Too Many Ponies are like the most impressive things in the world, and Georgia Bruce does all sorts of awesome trick training with her horses, and doesn't use like the principles of like your horse is right-brained or left-brained, or they have this horsenality and you need to assert your dominance and back them up, shaking lead ropes and chasing them with whips and play all these games and stuff. It's just all arbitrary to me and also is not founded in science. So yeah, but Emma Massingale, from what I can tell, I did not have all of the time in the world to watch all of her videos and see for sure, but she seems to be much politer. But I would caution everyone who watches videos like that, like, it's fun and exciting, but often the way that we get there is not necessarily the most fun way in the world, but her horses seem pretty happy, so I'm optimistic about the way that she trains. Sometimes you'll see Liberty horses that have their ears slammed against their head and their nostrils are pulled back and they look so pissed off, and that is a reflection of frustration in training methods. So I would pay attention to that if I were you. Anyway, so I think that is that. Also, listener who asked all of these questions, just if I forget to respond to the rest of your email, know that I appreciate your struggle. It is difficult for all of us to be able to do everything, but especially if you have extenuating circumstances that were asked to remain private, and I will keep them that way. It can be really hard to stay consistent and feel like you're doing enough, but you're learning, you're trying to better your education, and you are asking questions, you're thinking and trying to be the best trainer and horsewoman that you can be, and that is highly respectable. So again, everybody, let's not fault ourselves too much. We are all trying, and we're all learning and trying to be better. The only time you can fault yourself is when you're not trying and you don't care and you don't want to learn for the betterment of yourself or for your horse. But with that, everybody, I want you to keep your heads up. It has been officially 2 hours of me talking, and it only took 1 pee break and 1 bottle of water, so I am impressed. Thank you all. If you have listened this long, I hope you enjoyed this sort of deep dive into all of your questions. I hope I helped you in some way, shape, or form. Oh my god, my cat almost died. Yeah, did that scare you? Anyway, yeah, so I hope I answered you guys' questions. I hope that you guys are enjoying these episodes. And if you have a question, again, you can email me at jetreelpodcast@gmail.com. Please, again, let me know if you would like me to answer your question on the podcast, and if you are okay with me saying your name or not. Beyond that, I think that that's going to be about it. Be sure to follow the Jet Reel podcast on Instagram, and if you want to follow me and my ponies, I'm JETEquiTheory, literally on every social media platform: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. You got it. All that good stuff. And with that, I think I'm going to leave you guys. Thank you so much again for listening, and I hope that the sporadic sponsorship posts throughout this one were not too annoying. I know they are repetitive because I only have 2 sponsors currently, but I would like to maximize if I'm going to be talking for 2 hours. I hope that you guys don't mind a few extra sponsorships. I do apologize, but thank you so much for listening and tolerating it. It really helps me a ton. And beyond that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Until Tuesday. Goodbye.